These are my favorite 10 Venom decks in Marvel Snap. If you're looking for a Venom deck to play, this is the video for you. Give the video a like if it's helpful. We have Deadpool decks, Nimrod decks, a Galactus deck, Thanos decks, Deathwave decks, and Big Fat Zola decks as well. We've got it all. A lot of work has gone into this one, so please give it a like. Up first, my favorite deck of all is the Deadpool deck, which I did post the full highlight video earlier on my channel. So if you want to find out more about this deck and see 100-point Deadpools, go watch that video. It's a juicer. It's all about getting Deadpool as big as possible, and it is without doubt the best way to play Deadpool, in my opinion. But it is. You just have to trust me. Up next, we have Kmbest's Deadpool deck, which he shared on a video. I did make a slight tweak. This one is using Death. The big problem with playing Death and Deadpool together is the Bast synergy. Bast is going to make your death cost 3, or have 3 power, I should say, which means that it's kind of impossible to include both of them in the same deck unless you're an absolute reckless mad lad. So this one, the idea is wave on 5, and then you can play Death and Zola on turn number 6. Most likely you're going to be Zolaing your Death, but you also might be able to Zola your Venom or your Deadpool in other situations as well. Another take on this one is adding Knull into the mix, which I think is an interesting idea. This is something I built myself. Wave on 3 then becomes quite an interesting proposition, as you could play Knull on turn 4 and then Zola the Knull on turn 6, because that doubles the power of both the Knulls that you get. This is definitely one that I'm interested in checking out. There's some other interesting stuff you can do with Beast, making Deadpool cost nothing and then comboing a bunch of cards. You still have the option of playing Wave on turn 5 and then Death and Zola on turn 6. Also worth mentioning that Venom and Knull have some interesting interactions. If you eat the Knull, your Venom gets way more points than you would expect. So overall, they're the 3 Deadpool decks. None of them are that competitive. The best one is definitely going to be the ultimate Deadpool deck, in my opinion. And the Knull one looks like a spicy idea. Galactus Venom up next. Not a deck I've been able to play myself because, as many of you know, I don't own Galactus. And you can see there's an Iron Lad in there, which many of you do not own. Do not panic. You do not need this card. Chavez would be a great addition into this one because you just want to be drawing your cards on curve. So if you have no Iron Lad, I think Chavez is honestly just going to be doing you a really great job. This one was shared by Ordinary Harry on Twitter, and he thinks it's the best Galactus deck in the game. There's quite a few different approaches you can go for. Shuri on turn number 4, into Nimrod on turn 5, and then you can either play Galactus to just try and win, Galactus on its own. You might have Wolverine down and Nova down, and then your Galactus could just win the lane on its own. Alternatively, you could play something like Venom and Carnage, or you could play Destroyer to hit the Wolverine and hit the Bucky as well. So a very interesting deck. Iron Lad does add a little bit of sauce to the mix because you might hit something like Galactus or Destroyer or Shuri. There's all sorts of cool things, or Nimrod even. So I can certainly see the Iron Lad being a great inclusion into this one, but absolutely not necessary. Up next, we have another Nimrod deck. This is a bit of a classic Nimrod deck from myself, with a key difference. This deck I used to play at a very high level. I played it at a big $3,000 tournament, but you used to play Arnim Zola in it. Arnim Zola and Shuri just don't work very well together anymore because you need to play your Nimrod into your Shuri lane, which means that your Zola is no longer guaranteed to hit Nimrod. So instead of Nimrod, this one has got a Deathlock, a Venom, and a Carnage. The idea being is you can play Psylocke or Zabu on turn number 2, Wong on turn 3, Shuri on turn 4 into the Wong lane, and then the Nimrod is going to be 20 points. So then on turn 6, you can play either Destroyer into the Wong lane, which is going to destroy your Nimrod a bunch of times, or you can play Carnage and Venom, or Venom and Deathlock. So the Venom in particular is going to be really, really strong, as it's going to hold on to all the power of the Nimrods and also clear space for more. The Doctor Doom is a nice backup option as well, where you can go Wong, Shuri, Doctor Doom, and you end up with 20 points on the Doctor Doom itself, and then 10 points worth of Doom bots into the 2 other locations. A pretty fun deck. It did get a lot worse with the Zola nerf, but you can still do some really cool stuff with it. Up next, we have the Moyen Nimrod deck. Now, this is the one I mentioned earlier, built by one of the top pro players specifically for this video. I asked him, have you got any cool Venom deck ideas? And this is what he came up with. You can see there's a little bit of overlap between the previous deck I just shared and this one, where he's got cards like Wolverine, he's got the Shuri, the Venom, the Carnage, the Deathlock, the Nimrod. But the Professor X and Daredevil inclusion is incredibly spicy. So your opponent might just be expecting the Nimrod, and then suddenly you just confirm the win with the Professor X, and then you can play Destroyer into another location. That's also going to then mean that all of your cards in Professor X lane are safe and sound. This is absolutely a deck which I'm going to be doing a full video on in the next few days and checking out. I'm super excited. The Wolverine in particular, I think, can go crazy with Venom. If you can destroy it with Carnage and Deathlock first, you're going to have a 6-point Wolverine, which your Venom can then just consume and hold on to that 6 power. Up next, we have one which I'm sure many of you were expecting, and it's Deathwave with Venom. I'm not exactly sure the best way to go about this one. This is the traditional Deathwave list, except instead of playing Bucky, I've put Venom in here, which I think is probably not the way. You probably just cut the Deathlock instead. So I'm going to update that in the description. This will have Bucky instead of Deathlock. So Venom just slots in instead of Deathlock, and it is going to be 1 point worse when you eat Bucky, but it's going to be a lot better when you're hitting stuff like the Yondu, the Squirrel Girl, the Hood, although not the minus the Hood. I was talking about the Demon. That's one thing you do need to be careful of. But there's also like some other things you could do. Like I really do love Angel in these Deathwave decks. It thins the deck quite a bit, of course, if you can destroy and have it in the deck. If you do draw it, it's just something that you can eat, and that gives you some more death triggers. And the other thing is as well, like with Venom, Angel has a lot of synergy, because let's say you eat Squirrel Girl or the Hood with Carnage, you could then eat the Angel with Venom, giving you an extra destroy trigger, giving you thinning, and also giving you more points on Venom. So I actually love the sound of Angel. I think you always need the Doctor Doom, the Shavas, the She-Hulk, the Death. The Deathlock Venom dilemma is now a very interesting one. Bucky Barnes, also a very good card. So yeah, lots of things to consider, but just in general, Venom should be making the cut over Deathlock in these decks, and you could just do a straight swap. So this will be Bucky here. My apologies for the mistake there. Up next, we have a Thanos Deathwave deck, and I'm not so sure I love this one, because previously Killmonger is the only card that you would play in these death decks with Thanos, and if you miss the Killmonger, then you just don't need to worry. Venom's interesting though, because it doesn't work like Carnage, and it doesn't work like Deathlock, where if you find these cards off of Lockjaw, you're going to be losing a bunch of points. The one problem you would have is if you eat your Devil Dinosaur with Venom, it wouldn't keep the ongoing points. It would only count as 3. So that's why it's very awkward if you find it off Lockjaw. But it does give you another way of getting more death triggers. It does give you another way of consuming cards. It's kind of interesting, but I would probably say that Venom doesn't quite belong here, but I thought I would share it nonetheless. Okay, the final 2 decks, we have Venom Zola. This is a classic deck. In fact, the first game of Marvel Snap I ever watched was like a developer showcase before the beta came out, and one of the developers was playing a deck very similar to this. The idea is that you just play lots of stats like Lizard, Maximus, Typhoid Mary into the same location. You then venom them on turn 4 or turn 5, and then you either Taskmaster or Zola on turn number 6. This one's also got Angel. The Hood is in here. You do want to make sure you're not eating the Hood with Venom, but the Demon is a really good way of feeding the Venom to get a big fat Zola. It's a classic deck. It's not going to be very good. It's going to hard lose to Shang-Chi, but there's honestly a lot less Shang-Chis going around right now than there have been in previous months. The final deck is very similar, but there's a Knull added in there as well as just a backup play. No Taskmaster in this one either, but it does look like a pretty spicy looking deck. It's very similar to the Deadpool Knull one we looked at as well, where you can play Wave on turn 3, and then you can play Knull on turn number 4, and then Zola it or Venom it later on. The She-Hulk and Death are in there because you can play Wave on turn 5, and it just turns into a Deathwave deck. So they're my favourite Venom decks. A lot of them are more on the meme side, but this is the perfect opportunity for me to showcase some of these really fun decks that you might want to crack on with. If I had to say the deck which I think is going to be the best, I would say probably Galactus, if you own it. The second best deck, I'm going to go ahead and give to the Deathwave deck with Bucky instead of Deathlock. The third best, I'm really excited to check this out. And then probably I'm going to give the fourth best to Deadpool. Deadpool, not the most competitive archetype, but it's just absolutely crazy. Certainly interested in checking out some Knull Zola stuff with Venom as well. And I do think Nimrod with Venom and Carnage honestly could be very strong as well. So excited to be testing some of these decks out a little bit more. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'm super excited with this Venom buff and looking forward to hearing how you guys get on with all the decks. Thanks so much for watching and see you on the next one. Bye bye.